Amigos, amigas, ¿cómo están? This is Joe David Cantu for Hispanic News Online. We are doing our 30 for 30 for Hispanic Heritage Month. And like I said, I was going to promise you 30 Latinos for 30 days. And I'm bringing you a little bit of everything from educators, doctors, entrepreneurs, a little bit of everything. So this morning, I'm going to bring you somebody, a Latina, that is going to be really interesting. Um, Verenice Gutierrez is going to be speaking with us this morning, and I want to welcome her to the show. So thank you for showing up this morning and talking to us. And Verenice, can you give me a little bit of information about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. So I am a first generation Mexican American, born and raised in El Paso, Texas, to Mexican immigrants. I like to say that I had the great gift of growing up bilingual, bicultural, and binational. So for me, growing up in El Paso and being right across the border from Juarez, I I didn't have a concept of a border because I spent just as much time on both sides with each family, and that had a lot to do with who I am now and the the things that I'm interested in. And of course, I am a Tejana through and through. Love, love, love Tejas.
Ms. Gutierrez, you know what? You're just like me. You're what I call a border baby, aren't you?
Yes,
You had one foot in one country and another foot in the other country. We were just like that down in the valley, in the Rio Grande Valley. That's where I'm from. So you know the whole concept of how it is to just go down there for the day or come back in, and and it's funny because I speak to a lot of people across the country, and they are talking about immigration, and it's really kind of a different concept from what you and I actually know about immigration, isn't it?
absolutely. My parents, like I said, were immigrants. So my entire life, I heard the story of how they came to the United States and the why, the absolute outright racism that they experienced, and the words that people called them. And at the same time, throughout my life, I still have family that is in this country undocumented. And it's so I had the privilege of being born on the north side of the border, and I have American citizenship. But when I see cousins, aunts, uncles, in-laws that are in this country without documentation and the struggle that they go through, um, it really sends me into this very emotional space to hear um, the narrative that is said about them in the media, because it's so not accurate of every single undocumented immigrant. And and I know what it looks like for them. I know the struggle that they go through, and I also know how long it takes to get in line, if you will. It takes years and years and years and thousands of dollars. So, I mean, I could go on and on and on about immigration because it has touched my life from the onset.
Give me a little viewpoint, because it's funny when I talk to people, especially up in the north and stuff. They have no idea. Let me just break it down to you. I live in 100 miles. My community was 100 miles from the border
Okay.
in Brooks County, and
Okay.
yet every day I'm actually fourth generation Tejano, not even American. My family was here before it was Texas, um, and yet every day I had to go to school 24 miles to my closest town. But between my little town of Encino and Falfurrias, there was a little thing called a border checkpoint. You know what that is?
Absolutely, because they have those between Las Cruces and Albuquerque. So yes, I'm familiar with the border
And it's
checkpoints.
and you see, most people up north don't even realize that every day, even though I was a citizen, and everybody knew who I was, and they knew my family, and they knew that I was an American citizen, and that, you know, it. I was who I was, and there was no question about it. I had to drive 24 miles, and every day I had to stop and prove that I
Mhm.
was an American citizen. I had to basically roll down my window, and I could not give them lip. I had to prove, and if they felt like they wanted to pull me over, they could pull me over, and get check my driver's license to make sure that it was me. And people just don't realize what the border immigration is like. It's a different lifestyle. It's a different concept altogether. Um, Tell me what it was like for you as a child, coming and going from Mexico and getting your education. Did you get your education here in the U.S.?
Yes, I did. I'm a graduate of El Paso Independent School District, and then a two-time graduate from the University of Texas at El Paso. I earned my bachelor's and my master's degree there, and then I earned my doctorate from New Mexico State. So all of my education was in that border region. But it wasn't uncommon for my mom to pick us up from school and say, vamos a ir al mandado. So we're going to go get groceries. And that didn't mean the local Safeway or Albertsons. That meant we're going to Juarez, because you could get um, a pound of the key limes for under $1 uh, over in Juarez, whereas in El Paso, you weren't going to get a pound of the key limes for under $1. So she picked us up and would say, vamos a ir al mandado, and that meant we were going over to Juarez. We would go and buy our groceries over there. We got medicine over there. Sometimes it meant we would go to grandma's, but not always. Um, it was seamless for me. And you did your homework while you were in line at the bridge because it was going to take at least an hour. So we sat in the back seat, and my mom would say, "Do you have homework?" And if we did, we just did it. Um, and we got used to understanding that it was going to take about an hour to come across. Um, and it was, like you said, you had to be very serious. You had to be ready that when you got to the Border Patrol agent, that you looked them in the eye, that you said American, that you were respectful. Um, so it was either American or U.S. citizen that you said. Um, they would often ask my mom, what was the purpose of your visit to Mexico? And she would say, mandado, or um, fuimos a ver a mi mamá. So, there was always a legitimate reason why we went.
Right,
Um,
right, right. Do you remember?
and
Do you remember the fear? Remember that fear that you used to have sitting there waiting?
um, I only had fear once, and I had gone over there with my aunt. She took me and one of my cousins, and we were young. We were probably about, if I was 8, that made him 6, if, somewhere around that age, because he's 2 years younger than I am. And when you have kids that young sitting in the back seat with nothing to do, there were no iPods, there were no smartphones. We're talking 1980, way back in the Stone Ages, if you will.
Yeah,
Uh, so we're sitting in the back seat and we started to entertain each other. And, kids that age get silly. And I remember her absolute panic because she couldn't get us to stop the giggles. That's what we had at the moment. And I would look at him and I would start laughing and he would look at me and he would start laughing and it just escalated and we couldn't stop. And I remember her absolute panic of you have to behave. Once we get to that border patrol agent, you have to
right,
behave
right,
because we're all brown.
right, right,
And so that's the only time that I remember that. Um, and then there was a time for some reason where certain fruits and vegetables weren't allowed over, but my mom would still, the key limes, my God, I think we put lime on everything. And she would say, put them under the seat. And it was contraband.
right.
But we had to have our limones.
And
You know.
do you remember this phrase? I know that I don't know how prevalent it is across the country, but as a border baby, no digas nada, no digas nada. You remember that words when they would tell you, be quiet, no digas nada, be good, straight laced, be straight faced, don't cause any problems, no digas
Hmm.
nada. Remember those
Yeah.
phrases?
Yeah. And I also remember being told um, not to add any more to a question. Like
Yeah,
if the border patrol agent said, "Do you go to school?" All you need to say is yes. You don't need to start rambling about, "Oh yeah, I attend, I attend Lee Elementary. I'm in the third grade." Like no, because then it could be perceived that the reason you were giving that much detail is because you had something to hide.
that's right. I remember
So
that.
if they said, "Do you go to school?" Yes.
Right.
What grade are you in? Third. What school do you go to? And then that was also a way for you to show that you understood English because each question was in English, and so um, being able to say, "Are you in school?" and you just say yes. Then the next level is, "What grade are you in?" So each level could also demonstrate to the border patrol agent that, look, I know English, so I must be attending a school in the United States,
Right.
right? Oh yeah, I remember. I
Yeah.
definitely remember.
So tell me, how did all that affect what you're and please tell me, inform the rest of the people because they don't know about you. Tell them
Right.
what you're working on and what you're doing right now, and tell them also how this affected what you're doing now.
So I recently walked away from being a school principal. I was a school principal in an urban school in Portland, Oregon, and I walked away from that. Um, and right now, what I'm doing is I'm trying to set out on my own to work with different school districts across the country, because what I've seen in my 20-year career is how poorly school systems educate students of color and especially second language learners. Um, so at the school where I was principal, 60% of my population was Latino slash Hispanic, um, predominantly children of immigrants or immigrants themselves, and Spanish speakers. So when I came to this school, I was the first Latina principal that the school had ever had. And I show up, there's 60% of my population is Latino, Spanish speaking, and there was only one Latina teacher, and none of the secretaries spoke Spanish. So I thought, how do you communicate with the community? Well, they did it. They would find there was one Latina teacher and one Latina educational assistant. So if a Latino family came, they would find the educational assistant, take her away from whatever she was doing so that she could come and translate. And I said, no, that's got to stop because Maria, of course her name would be Maria,
Of
that
course.
Maria has to be doing her job, which is helping in the classroom, not translating for you. So I came in, I immediately hired a Spanish speaking secretary, which threatened the other two secretaries. I hired a Latina assistant principal. So my first year there, I like quadrupled the number of Spanish speakers just by showing up myself, one secretary, one assistant principal. And then I set out to do two things. One, bring a Spanish immersion program into the school so that the kids could learn in English and Spanish, maintain both languages, and achieve at high academic levels. And I set out to diversify my teaching staff. When I got there, 97% of the staff was white. By the time I left, I had diversified it enough that it was like 50-50. 50% of the staff was white. The other 50% was different ethnic groups. I had Latino, I had African American, I had Asian, and I would not hire anybody who was not bilingual. So anytime that I had a vacancy and I would look at the applications, and we would get like 200 applications for one first grade job. I would filter out anybody who didn't speak another language, and it didn't have to be Spanish. It could be, um, Vietnamese, Chinese. I didn't care. I just wanted bilingual people. So that was my first thing. So what I ended up doing in my building, first of all, I diversified it. Second of all, I brought in what is known as the gold standard of bilingual education. I brought in a Spanish immersion program for my kids. Um, and the school, when I took it over, was a school that people in the neighborhood were running away from. Once we brought in the Spanish immersion program, I everybody started coming back because they wanted their kids to learn in two languages. So that all of that was informed because of the way I grew up. I have two languages. I didn't have the benefit of a bilingual program growing up. I went into an all English educational system, but my mom, who has been in this country for 44 years, refuses to speak English. And she wouldn't let us speak English at home because she would say, no, 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 aquí no se habla eso. Aquí tienen que hablar para que yo entienda. So she refused to speak English, and she wouldn't let us speak English at the house because that was her way to make sure we didn't lose our Spanish. Um, and and then also, bringing in diverse workforce, because I wanted my families to show up and be able to speak to the person across the counter, not to be, you know, having to wait 15, 20 minutes while they find somebody who speaks their language, you know. So that was big for me. And right now, like I said, I am branching out on my own, wanting to work with different school districts because the outcomes for second language learners are so poor. And not all second language learners are immigrants. A lot of them are like me, children of immigrants who don't speak English. So they speak a language other than English in the home.
So what are you how are you trying to establish a connection with the school districts, and what are you trying to implement with them?
Well, I'm doing lots of networking, and I have some contacts in different school districts. But what shocks me, and I just had this conversation with a woman that I'm collaborating with, what shocks me is that it has been 15 years since they instituted No Child Left Behind. And the one thing, you know, that we could talk about whether it's good or bad, but the one thing that it brought was this, or it should have brought, was this practice of looking at how the different groups perform in your school district. And there's still a lot of school districts that don't know how to do that. That they don't know how to look at how are the different groups performing, or if they have all these great reports, they're sitting there going, well, we don't know what to do with them. And that's what I can bring and say, okay, let's look at your patterns, let's look at your trends over the last 3 years, because you can't just look 1 year at a time. You need to look 3 to 5 years, and let's see what's happening with these kids. I mean, that's what I did in my school. And I found that the eighth graders that had been in the same school since kindergarten. Okay, so they're starting their eighth grade year. They've been at the same school for 9 years now. They had never met state benchmark. They had never met it. And I thought, my goodness gracious, these guys are eighth graders. They've had 5 testing cycles, and every testing cycle, they're low or they're very low in academic achievement. That was shocking to me that the principal before me had allowed that to happen and that the district had allowed that to happen. And then I also looked at how are they doing in learning English, and most of them had gotten stuck at an early intermediate stage, which means it looks like I speak English really well, but when I have to go into an academic setting, I don't have enough English to be successful. So the system had failed them. The system had failed them in acquiring enough academic English to be successful, and then had failed them in giving them the supports to be academically successful.
Are you are and okay, let me ask you this because
Yeah.
you've been in multiple school districts as I remember, right? You've worked in
Yes, I
most of.
have.
So, do you see this a pattern across the school districts in general in public schools, or is this just something that you found in because you were in the Northwest, right? The last time, I mean, when you were working as a principal, the last job you had, right?
Right. The last 3 school districts that I've worked in have been in the Pacific Northwest. And I would say that it's not just a Pacific Northwest thing, it's across the nation.
And
Um,
how do you
Go ahead.
and do you think that it's it would be beneficial to get other Latinas like yourself who have been in the administrative positions and also as teachers to get together and maybe formulate some kind of curriculum or way to come into a school district and educate the because I mean okay, they should be doing it, but they're not doing it. Why are they not doing it? Is it because they need the instructions of how to get this done and set up? And is it something that maybe you should, that something that you're going to be trying to do with some other teachers and other administrators? Is that what we're talking about here? Is
So I am working with two other Latinas, um, and here's what makes us unique from most administrators outside of, I would say, outside of like that border region where there are a lot of Latinos, a lot of bilingual. What makes us unique in the Pacific Northwest, on the East Coast, and the Midwest, is that all three of us understand second language acquisition and what that looks like. Most of your uh, principals, directors, superintendents don't understand what it's like to have to learn a second language while you are learning math and science and social studies. And most of them don't understand the immigrant experience. The three of us have that in common. All of us entered the school system without English, and all three of us understand the immigrant experience. And trying to bring that, I'm especially worried about all those kids that are in detention down in Texas. What's going to happen to them when they enter the school system and the school system doesn't know how to educate them?
so have you reached out to maybe some of the local principals I'm sorry, like administration and teachers in the border areas? Is that something that you can be looking at to maybe possibly get some of their talent to come and help you guys and maybe help some other school districts? Have you thought about that? Is that
That's a potential step down the road. I have to um, this is one of those journeys that starts with one step, right?
uh-huh.
Um, there are over 7,000 school districts in the United States. And so getting into every single school district all at once is not a good strategy. You have to start one district at a time, show results. And here's the thing, there are kids across this nation that are dying, and I don't mean like literally dying, but they're dying educationally. 7,000 kids drop out every day. Okay, we cannot sustain that as a nation. If we have 7,000 dropouts a day, multiply that out times 190 school days a year. It's, one time I had the math right at the top of my head, and I don't right now. But I know that it's over a million teenagers drop out every school year. That's
Really?
not sustainable. Yes, that is not sustainable. So what happens when they drop out? Their employment prospects go down because
Yeah.
more and more you have to have a high school diploma, you have to have a bachelor's. I would tell my kids at my school, the bachelor's degree is the new high school diploma. For this generation, you cannot go out and think that without a bachelor's degree that you're going to have increased earning potential. And with each degree, your earning potential is maximized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have over a million teenagers dropping out every year, no high school diploma, which means that their earning potential is automatically diminished. It means they're more likely to be unemployed or underemployed. So they're going to have to maybe work two part-time jobs to try to put together 40 hours a week. So just economically for this country, it's a crisis that we have that many kids dropping out. Most of those kids are kids of color, the majority of them. Um, so we're looking at Latinos and we're looking at Black. Um, Asian tends to be what we call the golden minority, and they tend to perform better. But there are Asians that don't, and they're typically like your Samoan, Filipino. So we have all these kids of color, and then if they're second language learners, the school system has done a really good job of creating kids who are functionally illiterate in two languages. So not only are they not that proficient in Spanish, they're not that proficient in English. And so I see it as a crisis. Can I and my partners get into all 7,000 school districts? No, that's not sustainable. What I'm thinking is we need to get into the school districts that are, if you will, the ones that are generating your most dropouts. Because if you can help those school districts plug that leak, and then you can prove, like, look, we in this school district that was in serious crisis mode, we were able to make some significant changes, then more school districts are willing to come on board. Um, and the other thing too is that school districts have to commit for longer than a year. That's the other thing that I've seen throughout my career, is that every August when the school year is about to start, the district leadership stands in front of you with a new shiny initiative that's going to help increase achievement. You can't do that. You can't come in every August with a new initiative. You have to say, this is the initiative, and we're going to stick with it for 3 years at a minimum, because you cannot see enough change in 1 year. It's just not going to happen. When you're trying to shift culture, you're not going to do it in 190 days.
Wow, wow. This is really, really interesting. Kind of frightening, but interesting information. I mean, I wish I could have an hour with you and we could really delve into this a little deeper and stuff. But
Right?
I just wanted to, what we're doing this podcast is to introduce Latinos and Latinas to other Latino and Latinas in the country and also to the general market. So I'm going to give you a few minutes now because we're
Okay.
almost at 30 minutes
Yes.
to give us a little plug about where people can get a hold of you. If you're a teacher in a district that you're seeing this kind of problem, or that you have your own school that you're seeing problems with children's of color not getting the right proper education or the right information, or a school district. If you're part of a school district that needs help, why don't you? I'm going to ask her to give you all the information so that way you can possibly reach out.
Okay. So the way people can get a hold of me, we're getting ready to launch our consulting company, and the name of it is Adapt Source. So ADAPSOURCE, all one word. While we get all of our different online platforms up, there'll be a website, Facebook page, Twitter page, LinkedIn. People can reach me through LinkedIn. I am on there as Dr. Verenice Gutierrez, and my first name is spelled V as in Victor, Erenice, last name Gutierrez, Gutierrez. They can also find me on Facebook under the same Dr. Verenice Gutierrez. I have a Facebook page. Um, I am on Twitter, and the Twitter is at B as in boy, ILMAS as in Sam, T as in Tom, EAC as in cat. And I put that together. It's the first three letters of the words bilingual master teacher. So at Bill Mestique. You can also reach me through my email, which is the same like my Twitter handle, BILMASTEAC@gmail.com. Um, those are the best ways to find me. And then people who are interested, whether they're teachers who want to connect me to their principals, principals who want to connect me to an executive director or a superintendent who says, hey, we have these issues with our second language learners. We have
Right.
issues with our children of color, and we want to change it. They can reach me, and we can have a conversation about what is the best way for me to help your school district change these educational outcomes for these students of color, and particularly for your second language learners who tend to be, by and large, Latino.
And also, don't forget, if you're a parent, please reach out also
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
she's experienced it. She knows what it is. We're both border babies, and we both understand what the difference is with bilingual, binational, by heritage, everything that goes on with it. Verenice, I can't say thank you enough for joining me today. I know that we had a little problem there, but I think I'll fix that on editing. Uh, Amigos, um, primos, primas, anybody out there, please do not sit back and expect the school districts to jump on this. If you hear this information and it rings a bell with you, pick up the phone, send an email, send her a text. She's giving you all the information of how to get involved. We cannot sit back and let our kids fail because that's what it's set up right now. Is the education system is unfortunately not set up for our kids who are bilingual and need the help that Verenice and her group is trying to do for the school districts. So if you have an issue, please email her, call her, text her, send her some kind of way of contacting her, reach out, and I'm sure she will help you in one way or another. Denise, thank you very much from one border baby to another. I appreciate you coming on and talking to us. I hope people reach out to you, and thank you very much.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to listening to all of the different Latinos that you're featuring.
Well, thank you very much. And in that note, I'm going to say this: everybody, stay tuned. If one of these podcasts is not for your cup of tea and it's not something that you're interested, I guarantee you tomorrow's might, because we're interviewing all kinds of Latinos, every type and every type of business entrepreneurs, a little bit of everything, just to let you know that there's people working in your community who are trying to make a change for our community. And I want to thank each and one of my 30 guests for the 30 for 430 Hispanic Heritage Month series that we're doing. They are doing this on their own time, on with their own dime, just helping us out, get information out to you guys. So please do not sit back and expect somebody to do this for you. You need to reach out to them. They have asked you to. So please take this into consideration and tune in tomorrow for another Hispanic Latino that we're going to bring you. So hasta mañana y thank you for joining us today. Gracias.